Greetings, everyone. Aloha, and welcome to the Center for Chinese Studies webinar series at UH-Mānoa. My name is Winston Wang. I'm a moderator and organizer of this series, and I teach Minqing China in the History Department. Today's presentation is the ninth and the final event this semester. We are delighted to have Professor Michael Bruno with us today. The title of his talk is Collaborations in Ocean and Atmospheric Sciences between UH-Mānoa and the Chinese institutions. Despite rising political tensions between the two countries, researchers in the US and China are still working together in various fields, especially on fighting COVID-19. This kind of scientific collaboration across national borders is all the more valuable in times of global crisis like this. It not only benefits the countries involved, but also the global scientific community and the whole world. As UH faculty and researchers, we are especially interested in such collaboration between our university and its Chinese counterparts. Today's focus is on ocean and atmospheric sciences, which are critical for coping with global warming and other pressing ecological problems. They are also among the top-ranking research fields at the UH. Professor Bruno is a great expert in those fields. He will also present today as a top administrator at the UH. Over the past couple of years, the CCS have developed a range of new formats for our webinar series, one of which is Administrative Voice. Every year, we try to invite two UH administrators to join us and talk about UH area study initiatives or their personal research. Recent guests includes Peter Arnard, Dean of the College of Arts, Languages and Letters, and Denise Conan, Dean of the College of Social Sciences. Before introducing today's speaker, on behalf of the CCS, I would like to thank you all, especially Professor Bruno, for joining us. I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce the hardworking team of CCS staff members, led by current director, Professor Min Baoyu, Associate Director, Dr. Cindy Ning, and Program Coordinator, Ms. Jianing Sun. During this session, if you have any questions about technical or logistical issues, please use the chat forum that will be monitored and answered by Dr. Ning and Ms. Sun. Today's event is co-sponsored by the Office of the Provost at the UH. We would like to thank and acknowledge our co-sponsor for their support. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our distinguished speaker today. Michael Bruno is the Provost at UH-Mānoa, where he was previously Vice Chancellor for Research. His research and teaching interests include ocean observation systems, climate change, and community resilience. He is the author of more than 100 technical publications in various aspects of these fields, including the book, The Urban Ocean, published by the Cambridge University Press in 2018. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from the New Jersey Institute of Technology, a Master of Science degree in Civil Engineering from UC Berkeley, and a PhD degree in Civil and Ocean Engineering from the MIT and the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution joint program. Professor Bruno will speak for about 30 to 40 minutes, then we will open up for Q&A. At any time during the presentation, we invite the audience to use the Q&A forum instead of the chat function to send your comments or questions, which we will monitor and present to our speaker after his presentation. Please do not wait to send your questions until the very end, because then we might run out of time to answer them. We will try to take the questions in the order they have been submitted, but sometimes we have to synthesize or group them together due to the limitation of time. After today's presentation, we will send out a brief survey to our audience, and we would greatly appreciate if you could take a minute or two to give us some feedback. Okay, without further ado, let me turn over to Professor Bruno.
Thank you, Professor Wang. I really appreciate the kind introduction, and thank you to the rest of the team. And I am going to share my screen. And if I can get an okay, is the presentation showing up okay?
It is, it's fine.
Perfect, thank you, Cindy. And aloha, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today. Obviously, this is the title of the talk, and I have to say from the start that we will be going through today is a bit of a mix of some history about ocean and atmospheric sciences with a focus on international ocean and atmospheric sciences, and then we will talk about our own experience here at UH-Mānoa. I'll mention my own experience in working with collaborators from Chinese institutions. And so let's, without further ado, get started. So I begin the talk with this map, not only because I think it is a super cool and interesting chart from 1912, so more than 100 years ago. Not only is it an interesting map depicting the steamship and notably sailing ship routes that still existed in 1912 around the world. I'm showing this primarily to make my major overall point, the meta message, if you will. And that is that the ocean is not something that separates us as humanity, but the ocean is what connects us, and it always has. Transportation, food, energy, recreation, these are shared resources that lie in primarily international waters by treaty. We know that the ocean, of course, does not recognize national boundaries. And in fact, what one nation does in one part of the ocean eventually will, like climate change and so many other aspects, plastics pollution, overfishing, degradation of the marine environment affects all nations. And for that reason, the ocean has always been an area for treaties, for partnership, and for collaboration. Of course, it has been an area of conflict, and unfortunately will continue to be so, but I would rather focus on the ocean as a continued opportunity for international collaboration and cooperation. I want to also add a little bit of context. We see on this chart all of the major cities, some of which are major trading locations, others, like Liverpool, for example, which are really not any longer. So that's an interesting aspect of what we're looking here at. I'm just going to, for context, note that in 1990, there were 10 mega cities in the world. That is a city with 10 million or more inhabitants. By 2017, the number of megacities around the world had increased to 37 from 10 over the span of less than 30 years. Of those 37 megacities in the world today, 24 of them are located on the ocean. Most of them for the reasons depicted in this chart. They are centers of trade, centers of commerce. And so my other point here is that there has been no other time, I believe, in human history where it is more urgent than ever that there be strong international partnerships and collaboration around the oceans. So in doing research for this talk, I came across quite an interesting book titled Between the Devil and the Deep Sea. It really is a book about Professor C.K. Zheng, a famous Chinese oceanographer, researcher, really focused on aquaculture. I came across this story not Professor Zheng, but because I was conscious of the fact I knew that Sylvia Earle, Dr. Sylvia Earle, who might be known to some on this talk, she's a dear colleague, longtime friend, quite a famous ocean researcher and explorer. I knew that Sylvia was involved in 1973 in the early stages of the reopening and normalizing of relationships between the United States under President Nixon and the Chinese government. And in fact, she was invited as part of a delegation of female scientists to China in 1973. That was the beginning, you could say, of the modern areas of collaboration and cooperation in ocean and atmospheric sciences between the US and China. Again, doing more research, I came across this meeting in Bangkok in 1973, that same year. The meetings, it's notable, were taking place in the 1970s during the UNESCO, the UN International Decade of Ocean Exploration. So there was quite a lot of international meetings, quite a lot of initiative going on in the area of collaboration and partnering in the world's oceans. This particular meeting was for the purpose of examining mineral resources in offshore areas in and around Asia, again, under the auspices of the UN, and in particular, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, which is very well known today as being the location where the climate change reports come out frequently. A little bit later and closer to home, there were a series of workshops, again looking at natural resources, but here focused on the South China Sea. These meetings in 1980, 1983 were hosted by the East-West Center and focused on the possibilities of joint research and development across the nations in the region. I noted that our own Dr. Brian Taylor, Dean Brian Taylor from SOEST, was involved in these meetings as an assistant professor at what was then Hawaii Institute of Geophysics. It is now HIG, but still under SOEST. Notably, if one look at the participants here, you will see that they, of course, come from the East-West Center, but also from the Chinese Petroleum Corporation, from the U.S. Geological Survey, a U.S. agency, a few people from UH-Mānoa, Indonesia, several from Indonesia. And so I found that interesting. The kickstart for international collaboration, in particular in terms of understanding natural resources and even beyond the nature of of the Earth, if you will, residing under the ocean began in 1961. This is a photo of a very famous oceanographic research vessel called the Glomar Challenger. In 1961, there was the advent of dynamic positioning, which is a technology that allowed a ship like this, a drilling ship in this case, to remain on station, that is stationary at a specific location on the ocean surface, regardless of the strength of the currents, the wind, and the wave action. That ability had just become a reality in the early 1960s, and the U.S. National Science Foundation led the way with early demonstrations of the technology. What this led to was the creation of what became known as the Deep Sea Drilling Project. That project began in 1966 with the Glomar Challenger, and the Glomar Challenger was sent on various expeditions in the Atlantic, the Pacific, the Indian Oceans, as well as the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. This project, the Deep Sea Drilling Project, continued all the way into 1983, at which point it was renamed the Ocean Drilling Program, which was really, in many people's minds, the first truly international cooperative effort to understand the composition and structure of the Earth's seafloor, the ocean bottom, and the minerals and, of course, structure that it would contain. In 1985, the Glomar Challenger was replaced by the vessel Joint Oceanographic Institutions for Deep Earth Sampling, JOIDES Resolution, often referred to as the JR. A much more modern vessel. It was later modernized, I believe, in the mid-2000s. And this vessel took on the work of the Glomar Challenger around the world's oceans, again, doing investigations of the ocean seafloor and the subfloor beneath the ocean bottom. The Ocean Drilling Program continued until 2003. And that year, the Integrated Ocean Drilling Program began, building on all of the partnerships, the international partnerships that had been created since 1966. Along with the resolution, other drilling platforms were put into action until there were and still remain up to 26 different participating nations. This International Ocean Drilling Program continued until 2013, at which point the partners, the international partners, recommitted to joint recovery of the world's oceans under the new International Ocean Discovery Program. That International Ocean Discovery Program continues to this very day. And here is an example of proceedings under the IODP. This is an examination of what is noted here, gas hydrate slides. This is for an expedition that went on from Australia across to New Zealand. The reason I show this is I want to just show the international partners that were involved in this program just a few years ago. Of course, the National Science Foundation continues to be the major partner, along with Japan, the European Union, China, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, India, and Brazil. And I'm proud to show this slide, to show that at this point, our own Greg Moore, Professor Moore from SOEST, was involved in this particular expedition. Manoa has continued to play a major role in this area of ocean exploration and discovery under the International Ocean Discovery Program. But look on this list. You see faculty and researchers from the United States, from Germany, from China, Korea, Japan, Brazil, the United Kingdom, New Zealand, and Ireland, all on this. And there were a few other pages of PIs, but I wanted to show how vibrant and active this area of ocean discovery continues as recently as 2018, and it is ongoing. For myself, I've always had collaborators from Chinese universities. I was a speaker in April of 2013 at Shanghai Chiao Tung University, the premier universities, as most on this webinar would know, one of the premier universities in China. They have a very large and very accomplished School of Naval Architecture, Ocean and Civil Engineering. And this was an event sponsored by Lloyd's Register Foundation, which is an organization that I've had a very long relationship with. And Lloyd sponsored this event, and the focus of this particular keynote talk was strategic requirements of deep sea facilities. Again, this is all in the same vein as we've been talking up to this point, where we are concerned with ocean exploration and ocean discovery. And again, another example, in this case, a UK sponsor sponsoring an international event at Shanghai Chiao Tung University, and with participation from people like myself from the United States. I'm going to go back a little bit in time, back to November 2014. This was the first digital newsletter that SOEST put out on campus, and there were a number of really formative announcements, including Professors Carl and DeLong, and their a major gift to their work. But I want to note the third one on this slide, the agreement with the Ningguang University of Information Science and Technology, their agreement with SOEST and Manoa to create a new research and education collaboration with funding from Ningguang University of Information Science and Technology to support the creation of a brand new atmosphere ocean research center headquartered here at Manoa for the purpose of, number one, beginning to co-develop a computer model, a numerical model, to assist the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, to assist them with their sixth report in their series about climate change. It is noteworthy that among all of the climate models, the computer models that committee uses, there are only two developed in universities, and ours is one. This joint model is one of those. This project was funded for 5 years, just ended recently, along with this really significant research project. There was a second component that was focused on training of students, which ran from 2014 all the way until just a year ago. And that project was for us at UH to host both visiting faculty members from Ningguang University of Information Science and Technology, but also PhD students and postdocs. 20 different individuals have completed training under this project. And it has been a very significant project in every aspect, including from the standpoint of technology development. I want to give my thanks to Professor Bin Wang from SOEST, who really assisted me in some of my research for the talk and gave me the information regarding this really significant collaboration. And you see here a significant paper came out from this collaboration between UH-Mānoa and the Ningguang University of Information Science and Technology. I will note that Ningguang has 30,000 students, a little bit, I should say more than a little bit larger than Manoa, but remarkable 5,000 students majoring in atmospheric, oceanic, and related sciences. It has the largest meteorological program in the entire world. So, another reason why this collaboration, in our view, has been so successful. In addition to those two projects, those funded projects that I mentioned, there is also a 3+2 program between UH and NUIST for a joint master's. So students who are seniors in China will travel to UH-Mānoa and complete 2 years of study. And after completing those 2 years, they obtain both a bachelor's degree from NUIST as well as a Master of Science degree from UH-Mānoa. Those students all pay full graduate tuition and their living expenses. According to Professor Wang, to his knowledge, about a dozen students back to China after completing their degree and found very competitive jobs. A few others stayed and continued their PhD studies here, and still a few others found jobs here in the United States. So by all measures, this has been an extraordinarily successful collaboration. I want to provide some guidance, some context on maybe a broader scale from the UH campus. We have currently 38 academic agreements with universities in China that are active. That is, they have an expiration date. 21 others are active with no expiration date, and 79 that are either expired or as yet incomplete. But right now, 59 agreements that we regard as active. The 3+2 was renewed just over a month ago and is active until October of 2026. So we are looking forward to continued collaboration and exchange, scientific exchange, student and faculty exchange with NUIST for several years to come. I hope many years to come. Since the fall of 2016, event of the program, 28 students from NUIST have come to UH-Mānoa for graduate studies. 17 of those 28 were 3+2 students. And all of those students were in the atmospheric sciences program, pursuing either a master's degree or a PhD. Overall, our enrollment at UH-Mānoa of graduate and graduate students has fluctuated a bit, but has been in the area of 40 students, up to the 40s, as you see here. Recent high was 2017 with 47. Last year we had 43. This year we have 40. In the fall of this year, that is this semester, the top majors for undergraduate students are travel industry management and marine biology. Those are really the top for undergraduate majors, along with accounting, psychology, computer science, finance, and music. As far as graduate studies, the top majors are, no surprise, atmospheric sciences, but also business administration with 10 PhD students, Chinese, PhD in Chinese, as well as architecture. The School of Architecture has long had several very fruitful and still active collaborations with Chinese institutions. So let's go to current events. I gave a lot of history in our collaborations. I've also spoken about SOEST, atmospheric and ocean sciences collaborations, and the broader collaborations at Manoa. All of these collaborations are happening, and I'm happy to say continuing in a rather challenging time. Our two nations have entered into a rather challenging period in our relationship, and that those challenges have really been introduced into the academic environments in both countries. There are ongoing inquiry concerns about intellectual property and protection of intellectual property. But as this article, which was just a week ago in the New York Times, as the article discusses, there seems to have a disproportionate amount of interest and even targeting among Chinese and Chinese American scientists at U.S. universities. And U.S. universities, as this article indicates, have been warning of a backlash. They've been warning about adverse impacts to academic inquiry and discovery, scientific discovery at U.S. campuses. So this is something, whereas we acknowledge both governments' areas of concern and the need for continued dialogue, as academics, we need to be mindful of the potential impacts that go way beyond these specific concerns and find their way into all areas of scientific inquiry. I am always the optimist in the room, and so I'm going to go from this challenging bit of current news to what I regard as very optimistic and promising developments. The Global Ocean Observing System is one of the real successes, modern successes of cooperation across the world's oceans. This map that I show here, each of those dots represents a sensor, a piece of instrumentation that is measuring some aspect of the world's oceans, whether it's ocean currents, temperature, salinity, oxygen, you have it. Those instruments are, each of them, contributing to this emerging picture that we are developing in real time about the physics and really the health of the world's oceans. Each of those dots is contributed by a different country. Each color, I should say, and I know that the colors are not easily understood at this scale, but suffice to say that there are dozens and dozens of countries that have contributed to these sensors that are together giving us this picture. This is called the GOOSE, the Global Ocean Observing System, and that Global Ocean Observing System is actually composed of different regional associations, different regions of the ocean. And two of those regions are in the East Asian region. The near goose and the sea goose, the Northeast Asian region and the Southeast Asian region. These projects are continuing to expand, and as is said here on the right, you can see the map I've placed here, the location of the Northeast Asian region, which includes Korea, Japan, China, and Russia. That region is emerging as a growing and very critical region for the global observing system. And as is stated here, the involvement of China and South Korea is fundamental to the successful implementation of what's called TPOS, the Tropical Pacific Ocean System. And so I view this as really a promising development that I think bodes well for continued and expanded partnerships, particularly across US and Chinese researchers. The Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission Subcommission for the Western Pacific has been quite active of late. This is an announcement of a meeting that just occurred last week that is looking at the Ocean Decade Kickoff Conference for this WestPac, the Western Pacific organization. And again, these coming together, albeit online, again, bode well, in my view, for continued and expanded partnership. This is under the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. So this is just kicking off in this year, 2021, and will continue through this decade. Here's my last slide. Yes, in spite of all of the turmoil and the conflicts that exist on trade and other areas, our two nations can surprise everybody by exchanges and agreements like we had at the Glasgow Climate Summit. And again, this is something just a few weeks ago, again, another article in the New York Times, but this time talking about a promising development for the work that our two nations can do together. And I myself, I'm quite passionate about the need for collaboration, cooperation across nations for the purpose of better understanding the ocean and atmosphere. It is critical to the survival of our species. It's critical to the survival of the planet. And one look forward to expanding those partnerships wherever I can and however UH-Mānoa can. And with that, I will leave it to questions. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Bruno, for your very informative and insightful talk on this very important topic. We have a question. Let's move on to the Q&A session now. The first question I received is from John Petit. Thank you for your insights, Professor Bruno. It's especially good of you to highlight ways that scientists in US, China, Hawaii have worked together. You mentioned a challenging time for collaboration between US and Chinese universities. Can you speak a bit more about the challenges that UH-Mānoa faces? How will UH-Mānoa position itself in this kind of political environment? Are there particular institutional objectives or goals that we must safeguard when considering further collaboration? More specifically, what are the guidelines as we move toward to renew agreement between Chinese institutions and UH-Mānoa?
Well, thank you, Professor, and I appreciate that question. So the challenges exist in many areas, and some of those challenges, frankly, are not isolated to China. With respect to China, we were concerned about areas related to visas for students to travel here to Hawaii. Some of that was due to the actions of the prior administration and restricting immigration, particularly for the purpose of academic study. More lately, obviously, the pandemic has caused some serious challenges in the ability of our students and faculty to travel in either direction. So there's that challenge. With respect to research, a lot of the challenge revolves around intellectual property and export controls. But I have to say those challenges exist virtually for every nation. The safeguarding of intellectual property, for example, that is developed at UH, that concern and work to protect intellectual property goes on as a matter of course. Export controls is a very serious concern for all universities, whether they are here or even in other countries. All nations have controls that safeguard typically technologies that could be used for defense applications. Those kinds of technologies appear typically on a list is provided either by the U.S. State Department or by the U.S. Department of Defense, and our researchers remain knowledgeable about which technologies can be freely shared and which cannot. But those are regulations that we've all worked under for all of our careers, and I don't view those as in any way unique to this time. I think that our situation in the present relationship between our two countries has focused attention on these regulations, but these are not new regulations. They remain as they always have. They remain a challenge that our researchers be mindful of.
Thank you, Professor Bruno. I have a question. As a historian, I like to take a long-term and a macro view of things. The US and China have a history of successfully cooperating in science and technology since the opening of the relations in the 1970s. After 2000, the two countries have become each other's top collaborators in science, as measured by the co-authorship of scientific publications. But in the past several years, some people noticed that there is a real risk of decoupling between the two countries in terms of science and technology. I know you are an optimist. That's very good. I feel the same way. But I want to know what you think about this warning. And by the way, I'm very glad that UH has renewed the 3+ program with the Ningguang University of Information Science and Technology. That's the best, atmospheric major program in the world, one of the best, as you said. And it's going to play a good beneficial role in not only in collaboration between UH and the Chinese university, but also better the relationship between the two countries. So can you talk about your general assessment about the future of Sino-US collaboration in your field or in science and technology in general?
Yeah, thank you. So to me, there are areas that are very natural, and one would almost say are require collaboration across nations. It just so happens that my field, the ocean sciences, may represent the most, although I would argue that other critical areas like the pandemic and global health and health inequities, I think is another area that is very, very ripe and even urgent in terms of having international collaboration. So from my perspective, it's important for myself and for campus leaders, deans, research center directors, and others, right down to the faculty members, to take advantage of opportunities for collaboration, and in a sense, to be unafraid. I worry that the news that comes out can make faculty, students, maybe even deans, to be hesitant about exploring collaborations. I think that would be the worst of all outcomes. I think as an institution, we have to be unafraid, because it's through those collaborations, as you said, that you generate new knowledge and new understanding, as referenced by the level of publications, joint authorship and publications. So that's not just me being an optimist. I guess we both are, but even from a practical standpoint, in order to make progress in a number of different disciplines, we need to have strong international collaboration, and that includes with Chinese institutions. And I think Manoa, given our geographical location, given our long history with China and the Chinese community, I think we can show the way.
Indeed. I have another question from David Young. What role do you expect? By the way, David Young is our past the previous director of CCS. What role do you expect CCS to play to enhance the partnership between UH-Mānoa and Chinese universities, particularly in the area of today's topic?
Well, thank you, David, and it's nice to hear from you, even though I can't see you. So, David, I think the Center for Chinese Studies can be a place that can facilitate a coming together of different groups, and it can be. I think those gatherings, if you will, whether online or in person, can be very intentional. So going back to what we were just discussing, it may be possible to have, gatherings around specific areas of science or of music and the arts, and the center can be that, if you want to say gathering place. The Center for Chinese Studies has, it's a U.S. home, a UH-Mānoa home, but there are many contacts to Chinese institutions that I think if we could combine those contacts with some of our faculty and deans who have specific opportunities in mind, whether it's research or student and faculty exchange. I think the center can play an important role as a facilitator.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bruno. I have another question for you about the dilemma of scientific research. I'm not a scientist, but I am interested in this kind of topics. In many cases, scientific research served a double or dual purpose, right? On the one hand, it helps address various transnational and even global problems like global warming and climate crisis. After all, wind, water, and air, fish don't know any political boundaries. So we need transnational collaboration to study those topics. But on the other hand, scientists conduct research to advance their own country's strategic interests. Some of those research even include a military component. And here comes one of the paradox of scientific research. On the one hand, you want to keep people from knowing what you are doing and what you know. On the other hand, if you are not sharing, you don't know what other people are doing. And if they are doing something really great, clever, and useful, it's your big loss. So it's really a dilemma. As a scientist yourself, how do you deal with this kind of tension?
Well, in the first instance, I would say it would be very unusual for us to approve a research project that does not allow full publication of the results. That would be highly unusual and would be carefully scrutinized. We do not conduct secret research on the Manoa campus. And so that's the first answer that comes to mind. I do accept what you said. It is a reality. Even research that is freely published can be used for all sorts of applications, including military or including, the strategic exploitation of natural resources, oil and gas, et cetera, or minerals on the ocean seafloor. I think ocean scientists have always recognized that if we discover a geologic formation somewhere in the world's oceans lying in international waters, and that feature has very valuable minerals, the scientists have no power to prevent the exploitation of that site. And that's just a very minor example, but there are other examples all around, and I think I would say extending to other areas of science. So, I would say that universities need to be quite careful about conducting scientific inquiry that would be restricted in its dissemination. I would always be very hesitant about supporting that kind of work. There are other avenues for that kind of research that don't necessarily need to involve UH faculty and in particular students, which is another issue altogether. Very often in universities that conduct that kind of research, students cannot be involved. So there are a number of things that give me pause.
Thank you. We have a couple questions from Minbao. Thank you for your informative talk, and I'm delighted to learn about the close collaboration between Ningguang University of Information Technology and Science and UH-Mānoa. In terms of the specific projects on the Earth system model, can you elaborate what specific knowledge Ningguang University of Information Science and Technology and UH-Mānoa each bring to the table? And the second question is, given the tension between US and China, do you think it is advisable to diversify UH-Mānoa's relations with Chinese-speaking universities in other locales like Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Singapore?
Well, Mingbao, I'm really sorry. I can't give you the details about what each researcher contributed. I myself have had no involvement in that project. Professor Bin Wang, I'm sure, can answer that question. He may even be on the webinar. So I can't quite answer that. I know that UH-Mānoa has had a very long and illustrious history in the computer modeling of atmospheric processes, including the impact of topography, mountains and the like, and also the interaction of atmosphere and ocean. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that those are a couple areas that we contributed to, but I think I'd leave it up to the experts to answer that. Sorry. With respect to the second question, that was not the focus of the talk, but certainly UH-Mānoa has a number of active collaborations with partners in Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore, and as well as exchanges in a variety of different areas, and not the areas we've been talking about. I can only say that my office and the Office of the Vice Provost for Academic Excellence and our folks in global engagement are always looking for and supporting joint projects and exchange agreements with Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Singapore, certainly. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. So I'm gonna, make good use of my privilege as the moderator and ask more questions. As a historian, I'm gonna ask another question related to history. So I feel like that today's geopolitics are starting to rhyme with history, because in the 1960s, US and Soviet Union scientists, they sought new ways to collaborate despite deteriorating political relationship. And those opportunities required navigating real and imaginary national security concerns. In the 1980s, it was Japan that offered many opportunities for cooperation with American universities. At the time when Japanese growing strengths as seen as a competitive economic threat, now we have a new threat from China. And can you talk about those major opportunities and the risks to collaborate with China specifically nowadays? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly that is the context in which we are trying to sustain academic cooperation and academic exchanges is the two powers. The two nations are the dominant economic powers in the world today. And it seems, unfortunately, almost inevitable that then creates a competition. And as I said earlier, I think the best path in that situation is to focus on those areas where there needs to be partnerships and collaboration in order to solve problems of mutual interest. The most recent, obviously, is the pandemic. But we know there will be other medical issues that arise and challenges that arise. We also know that climate change, as you correctly pointed out, the climate crisis is affecting both of our nations. I think that's why Senator Kerry and his counterpart from China quickly pursued their own separate meeting in Glasgow. These are the two economic powers in the world today, and one could argue that these are the two that will likely be most affected in terms of population and economic impacts due to climate change. So I believe that academic institutions like ourselves can help, in a sense, change the conversation and maybe show a light at the end of the tunnel that through collaboration we can address jointly problems that affect both of us. I think that's our role. I don't think that we as a university really, outside of engaging in studies and meetings, I don't think that we have a role to play in the politics of it all. And as academics, we all like to think that we can get beyond the politics. We know that the reality is different, and we are affected.
I totally agree. Despite the great power competition between the two countries, there are several areas where U.S. and Chinese interests do intersect with each other. And one of those issues, the most important issues we can cooperate between the two countries, is climate change. And fortunately, the two governments expressed their willingness to cooperate and enhance the cooperation in tackling this urgent problem. And our university can try to play a very important role and facilitating role in this kind of effort. And we are glad that the Biden administration has rejoined the Paris Agreement and also identified climatic change as a priority issue, because according to a recent poll, it was just conducted, a majority of U.S. voters see climate change as the most important issue for U.S. and China to cooperate on, more so than COVID-19. And they are even supportive of U.S. and Chinese military working together to assess climate risk and improve disaster preparedness. So this is really a key issue that we can work on, and university can play a very important role in it. That's very, very important. Thank you.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, I think we have had a very dynamic discussion. I'd like to thank Professor Bruno for your very dynamic and very authoritative evaluation of the situation and your introduction of the progress on Chinese American collaboration on those issues, and also the collaboration between UH-Mānoa and some Chinese universities. We hope this kind of collaboration can continue for a long, long time and can play a very important role in bettering the relationship between the two countries. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so we'd like to thank you again, Professor Bruno, for your talk, and we'd like to thank our participants for your very insightful comments and questions. And this event has been recorded, and we will share it on our website and also on the YouTube channels. So please check it out if you are interested. And again, this is our final event this semester, and there's no better way to conclude this, than inviting Professor Bruno to talk about a very important topic. And we have many exciting events lining up for you in the spring. We hope you can join us again. We'll send out the preliminary list of our speakers as soon as possible. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and see you next time. Thank you.